Now then everyone, this is the Wedding Mavericks podcast, a podcast for wedding photographers and videographers who want to build successful and sustainable businesses. My name is Jules, I'm joined by Lindsay, and on this episode we are discussing everything about real life, health, happiness and your business. So, we thought we'd talk about a more, general topic than just photography and videography on this one. But first, it makes sense to talk about why we haven't recorded a podcast in a while. So,
for this half term, basically. Yeah, where have we been again? So we restarted the podcast after the summer with a new season. Had the intention to go a bit further into topics that were focused towards hybrid shooting.
Yes. That's going to be that's what the podcast will be going forward.
What we're going to get to, yeah. So slowly kind of trying to head in that direction. At the time when we came back, sort of late summer, there were lots and lots of things happening in the world, specifically from an economical point of view, which was bearing and is bearing a massive impact on our businesses, as we know, but also for our potential clients going forward and what their kind of spending habits might be and how that might change and be affected going forward. So in the last episode, we had a look at what we could possibly do and try to come of it from a position of sort of thinking about how can we can sort of, as business owners, adapt to these changes that are happening. We started to sort of focus on this in the podcast because we felt it was something that was so relevant to kind of what's happened. It felt a bit sort of
it's been a weird year, hasn't it?
To have not sort of acknowledged that and kind of talked about currently what's happening. We know it's not just here in the UK. We know that it's worldwide. So that's kind of why we sort of sidestepped, if you like, into the more kind of present at the time issues. And I guess the real kind of threat that there was to our businesses at that time. And yeah, so we tried to share with you some ideas of what you might be able to do to kind of think outside the box a little bit and generate some additional income for your business that perhaps wasn't straight up as necessarily like the way that you're used to doing business in terms of book a wedding client for photography or videography, perhaps a combination of the two. But where that wasn't happening, where could you kind of fill those gaps and what opportunities could you look for?
Yeah.
And then radio silence, as it were, from our end, and been a few reasons for that, and probably because I get way too emotional. I want to, in a nutshell, Jules, why haven't we recording for the last month or so?
Well, just before we go any further, if you are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see we've got our Christmas attire on here because we are recording this. We've got this cool Star Wars Christmas jumper with flashy lights on, and the world's biggest antlers. Lindsay's gone minimal with just the smallest Christmas hat.
Santa's hat and Santa's mitts.
Some paws on tits.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that's what it is. It's two mittens.
It's two mittens.
Okay, we might have to take that bit out. She might not let me keep that in.
Apologies. Here's me just like leading down into a bit of a, heartfelt explanation and just an idea for people of where we've been and, tone lowered. But hey.
Okay. So to kind of talk about the title of the podcast is obviously Real Life, Health and Happiness. So the thing is, we can talk about business and we can talk about photography and videography and weddings and all that jazz, but the reality is for most people, and I'm not going to say everybody, but for most people, those things are not the be all and end all. Now, I do see a lot of people posting stuff who are the people that are most active on the groups. I tend to find people that are really excited about it because they've just started, and that's totally understandable. I imagine kind of I was like that, 5 years ago. But obviously, once you've been doing this a few years, it is a job. That's essentially what it is. And real life and things that are happening in your other parts of your life are as important or more important than work, and they should be. So that's why we wanted to talk about this, because from our perspective, we've stopped recording, and I don't even know how many weeks it is since we recorded one.
Start of November was the last one that was out. I think it was the 4th of November.
So it's about 6 weeks, and prior to that, we'd stopped recording kind of early summer, and had like a break for quite like 3 months or something, 2 or 3 months. And the thing is obviously it gets busy for everybody in this industry during the summer, but for us, there was more to it that we didn't talk about previously, and we're going to talk about a little bit now, because we think it's relevant for people to understand that everybody's going to be going through some shit at some point, and you should be ready for that, and you need to kind of know what you're going to do when that happens. So for us, we have 2 children, and anybody who's got a family and who's got kids will kind of know what that's like at different stages of your kids' lives. There's different things that kind of take your time and attention, and there are different challenges. So obviously with newborn babies, if anybody's having if you're currently pregnant, having a newborn baby, or you've got a new child, you'll be doing the sleepless nights. You'll be finding it difficult to kind of get rest, and there'll be a lot of adapting, because if it's your first child especially, that's new. Obviously, as they get older, I would say kids tend to get easier. However, there are stages that kids go through where that different challenges come up. And for us, we have 2 daughters. One daughter, the youngest daughter, has some special education needs, which have been around for quite a few years now, as in we've been aware of it for probably the last 4 or 5 years. But as she kind of started school and then got into school a bit more, and things got a little bit more serious in terms of doing academic type work, as academic as it gets when you're in primary school, it was quite clear that she was quite behind. So for a number of years, in different respects, we've had to really kind of put a lot of time and effort into trying to help her, and pushing forward, haven't we, with trying to get the extra support that she needed. And our older daughter, she's always been quite kind of capable in terms of schoolwork and things like that, but she has always struggled a little bit in terms of like social anxieties, and just she's had some difficulties that she's managed really well, and I think we've adapted to them slowly as a family over the years. But she started high school this year, and because she was starting high school, and because of a few other things that happened earlier on in the year, things just got really bad for her. And I don't think we've ever experienced anything like it, have we?
No.
So we're obviously not going to go into all the details, but because it wouldn't be fair to her. But she's just been really struggling, and it's ended up in a situation where she was starting high school, and for us that was going to be a real struggle to make that transition sort of comfortable for her, and it didn't go well. And so we've had a difficult summer from before the summer started, when she was still at primary school. The last few months of primary school were quite challenging. That's come over the summer, and then it's cascaded into like the autumn when she started the new school, and it's basically resulted in she doesn't go to school at the moment. She just can't manage it, and we're having to try to get some help and support specific to what she's struggling with. And it's just really freaking difficult. Like, I've never experienced a situation where you can highlight a particular problem and there just doesn't seem to be it's very difficult to get the specific help that you need. So that's what's basically been happening for us, and it's turned our lives upside down, if we're being honest. It's made it very difficult for us to work. So that, that's the reason really that we haven't been recording. And I think that in the last few weeks we've really been trying to adapt and see this as hopefully not long term, but see this as a longer term situation. So we've got to be able to figure out ways through it. I think for quite a number of weeks and months, we were just trying to find our way through it, and there didn't seem to be a way to control anything. It was just like, it was out of control, basically. We didn't know what to expect from one day to the next, and because of that, it was really hard for us to plan. And that's been the reality of pretty much the whole year since May time. So, it's got progressively worse over that time. That's why we didn't record the podcast the last sort of couple of months, and we've obviously recorded it now because we want to continue with it, as we want to continue growing our business and continue making a living and livelihood. We have to, and that's what we wanted to talk about, because struggles like this are real, and you will have them too. There's no doubt. Nobody goes through the life without some kind of struggle. And if we're talking, we're giving you an example of what's been happening for us at the moment, and how that's impacted us. And it's impacted to the point where basically Lindsay doesn't really get much time to do any work, because she's trying to give me as much time to, because I do probably 70-80% of the editing. So I've been trying to focus on the editing. When we've got shoots, we've been trying to do them, but it's I'm not gonna lie, there's been some distractions. Trying to shoot weddings and commercial stuff. Then there's the editing. It's been more difficult to get that done, and then just everything else, has kind of gone to shit really. And we've just been trying to manage, and we're obviously going to make some changes to be able to hopefully adapt to that going forwards for the new year. Now we've got through the busy period, but if like us, you've had a busy period, and if anything happens during that period, for instance, other things that have happened in the past, bereavements, lost grandparents, my dad died way before we started doing this, but I tried to think back. I was in a different career and I had some time off, and there was no problem with that because we had good sick leave. It was well supported at work, so I could have a couple of weeks off, no problem. But if something like that happens to you now, which it can happen at any time and you're not necessarily prepared for it, that's going to be very difficult to manage when you've got to keep your business going. And that's where we just wanted to talk about, the realities of that, what you might do, how you might think and approach these things so that you can keep things together, really. Yeah. So, we'll talk about the sort of the what are you going to do? So if something serious happens, what are you going to do? And you have to think about it as having some kind of contingency plan, because you really don't know when if something was going to happen, whether it's something to do with your family, whether it's a bereavement, whether it's something that happens to you. What if something happens to you? And I've seen posts where people have been like, I've had like a serious accident, or I've had to have an operation, and it wasn't expected, and it's really, really taken my legs in terms of not literally, but it's like, what do you do if you can't shoot, or what do you do if you've got a load of editing to do and you just can't get it done?
I think that would, if I was to single anything out, of the difference between, I guess, those protections that you have being employed by a business or by an organisation compared to being self-employed and you're working for yourself. You talked on there about a bereavement, being able to take, you would have been able to have a period of compassionate leave or annual leave if you wanted to. And in a circumstance like that, there is inbuilt resilience.
Yeah, there's other people to take your slack, to take your job over.
To pick that up, who will be able to, for a period of time, do exactly that, take your work over. However, what do you do when it starts and stops with you? And we're in a really fortunate position, I think, because there are two of us. And so what we've been experiencing, in our family life, what we do experience in our personal life, we experience it all together, and that crosses over into work as well. And I think we're really lucky in that respect. But what about those of you out there whereby it could just be you? It might not be necessarily, you might have a family, you might not have a partner in your life, but in terms of the business that you're running, it could just be you that's running that and operating that. And so, what happens in those circumstances? Yeah, there is no resilience there in the background, is there?
There's no resilience, and you've got to think kind of both short and long term here. So you've got to think, well, I've got to keep my business going, because without it, I don't have like a livelihood, and people are expecting me to do things. I've made promises to my clients or whatever that I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and I've got to be able to deliver on that one way or another. But then at the same time, you've got to think about protecting your own health and well-being. If you're going through a period of struggle, and you're trying to keep going because you've got to deliver, but then slowly over that time, or maybe quite quickly over that time, it's seriously affecting your mental health, then over the more longer term, that's going to affect you and your business and your clients even more, because you're not going to be able to function. You might be able to pull off the delivery of things in the short term just to keep going, but if like us, we were just working. I mean, I finished edits only a couple of weeks ago that were from the summer, and I know I won't be alone. So, months people have been waiting. So you might be able to pull things off for a few weeks, but at some point you're going to break, and then everybody else that's waiting is not going to get. So you've got to approach this in a way that's sustainable. Like we're always saying, aren't we? We're always using the word sustainable. Well, it's the same. Contingencies have to be built into your business and the way that you're running your business and the way that you're doing things, so that you can keep going and sustain things over a period of time. So we're gonna start talking about the practicalities around how you might do that. That way.
Yeah, I think with for me, a part of being able to achieve sustainability through your business is getting the balance right.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the most difficult things to achieve, or I could say, hand on heart, in our 5.5 years, it's what we've been striving for.
Yeah.
I've always had the confidence and the faith in the fact that we can grow our business and we can be successful in so much as I do believe that we can achieve longevity in what we're doing. However, achieving balance, it's the one thing that seems to get further and further away. And I remember that we started this year. We're can you believe it's been almost 12 months since we started this recording together of the podcast, and we set out with the best of intentions, goal setting.
Because it was the first year as well where we'd both been solely focused on the business. We didn't have like either university or other jobs going on alongside it. We were both in this full time, and the kids are a bit older, so we were like, they don't need as much as they did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, on paper.
Yeah, on paper. It didn't work out like that.
It seemed like the other things, so there's the work side of life, but then the family side of life, it kind of seemed like, okay, this is the first time it feels like we can actually consciously set a path towards achieving balance through the year here. But I'll tell you now, you were just talking about there a few weeks ago, you delivered the last of the films from the summer. Well, that's not because he sat with his feet up all day. I'll tell you now that he works longer days. Jules works longer days now than he ever did working in an emergency service. And the real shitter, excuse my French, about that is the
Lindsay
fact
doesn't
that
swear very much. Not like me.
the real downside, not only to that, is yes, the long working hours and the kind of impact mentally, physically, how draining that is. But the reason it becomes so impactful is because when we both worked in the police, there was a shift pattern to it. And so one such shift pattern, we've done lots and lots, but one such shift pattern was that you would work 6 days on and then you would have 4 off.
Yeah.
There's no 4 days off with this. And you all will recognise that too. You will work the hours and the hours to try and get the work done, because as conscious business people, you know that one of the most important aspects of being able to achieve that sustainability is being able to deliver for your clients. And it's the reliability of you and working all of those hours, but there's no let up.
No.
So that balance seems to get further away for me.
But it's because you put something on yourself. So I'll give you an example. Like because you've brought up working in the police. Working in the police, you know, there's different sort of types of work you can do in that. Let's say, you know, you're just answering calls. When you go home, your job's done. So there is nothing to like carry with that. There are other roles that, you know, you're going to be carrying some kind of workload, some kind of investigative workload where you've got to look into ongoing cases or whatever. So you have got a responsibility to a victim or whatever of a crime that you want to investigate that. But the reality is the police, you know, and other emergency services, other public sector workers, they're so overworked. They've got so much to do. You can't deliver the kind of service. It doesn't matter how conscientious you are, because me and Lindsay were both conscientious people. You couldn't deliver the kind of service you really wanted to be able to deliver to people. And so you had to learn how to just let it go, really. You know, your days off were your days off, and you did what you could do in the time that you had. But if for whatever reason, if something happened and you didn't get that time, you just accepted that you couldn't deliver the service that you wanted to. When you're running your own business, it's completely different, because you're just waiting for somebody to complain, and you're going to take that so personally. And that's potentially such a threat to your reputation of your business that you're constantly struggling with this. I mean, this is how I feel. I'm not saying everyone else feels like this, but you're constantly struggling with this reputational thing of, this is how I feel. I don't want to let anybody down. I don't want my business to fail because somebody complains and someone writes a bad review and then everyone thinks I'm shit and nobody hires me. And you want to be able to do a good job and make people happy. You take it also personally. You're emotionally invested in it. It's not strangers to stranger relationship. You've put effort into to getting to know these people a bit, and you want to deliver for them. And, you know, they've hired you, and they've hired you, not Tom, Dick or Harry. So you feel like you want to deliver for them, and you take that personally. So I find it very difficult to switch off from that. And I also find it difficult to know that the work's waiting for me. Like if I say take a day off today, I'm only making it worse for myself next week. So I'm constantly battling with that. It is going to change, Lynn's, going forward. It is. I think we just haven't ever got there. And the last 2 years have been so busy because of the COVID, you know, the COVID situation, that it shouldn't have been like this. It's going to be like this when you're building your business. And then the idea is you get to a point where you've got it under control. And we were at a point where we would have got it under control had COVID not happened. So you know, in some ways, I know you're saying you see the balance getting further and further away, but you can get there. I do believe you can get there. You've got to get it, all the bits that we talk about on this to do with your pricing and what you're offering and how you structure your business and how you do all your administration, how you like kind of automate things and maybe outsource bits and bobs, and how you just basically find streamlined ways of doing things, how you don't overcook, you know, editing and things like that, so you just get it done. All this stuff, it's a journey. It really is. And I think that we're far enough into that journey now to have it. We know what we're doing. We've been misfortunate in timing.
And I think I think it's really important that we are addressing this and we are talking about this, not simply because it's obviously coming from quite a personal place, and certainly feeling like we need to give an explanation as to why the podcast, it's certainly we don't feel great about the fact that we just started again after the summer, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and we feel really proud of the fact that we're actually building a bit of a community here, and that we do have people that are good enough to kind of listen and tune in and sort of hear what we're talking about, and we really appreciate that. And yeah, I just think it's really important that we're doing this today, because I think
anybody can have anyone. This is going to be what everybody's going to struggle with.
This is the thing, but I tell you what, I don't see enough of. Maybe I'm not looking in the right places, but in the groups, I don't see people. I hear a lot of talk of, oh man, I've got so many in the backlog. Excuse me, but actually, sore throat. Excuse me. I don't see people talking about actually beneath the surface. How is this impacting them? And what I hope kind of comes out of today is that it's just a timely reminder, I think, to all of us to please recognise that regardless of where you are kind of in your work journey, as it were, running your own business within this industry, to just kind of take a look for a moment and have a look at whether it's just the topic of balance in its own right. What are you doing then to make sure that you do achieve a balance? What things are you putting in place? Do you have sort of boundaries day to day in terms of, I put the laptop away, or I put tools down, so to speak. This is what time I will work to, and I don't work past that. And if you can do that, I think that's amazing. But what kind of strategies do you put in place, and how strict are you with your working days to make sure that you are getting some degree of respite? Because just for let's look at it from the perspective of kind of creativity.
Which is a huge struggle. That's been a massive struggle for me because of what's been happening. It's been very emotional. Some of the stuff that we've been going through. It's not just the physical aspect of time and energy and stuff and motivation, but it's also the fact that emotionally you're a bit spent when you're dealing with something. Whether it's grief or whether it's stress or whatever, and so you become not very creative. It saps that energy that you would normally have. When you're doing a creative job, you can't just turn on and off the creativity. It's kind of got to be there because people are expecting you to deliver. It's not like I'm painting for fun, so if I feel like painting, I'll paint. It's not like that. You've got to just be. You have to be able to have a process, have an approach to something, which means you can just get it done no matter what. That's definitely something I've developed, and that's probably what saved his skin really these last few months. Yeah,
I think so. So let's talk, so as you're listening to this, please just take a minute to kind of think about where you sit within this. Think about what's going on, behind the camera, if you like, what's going on in terms of your real life. And obviously we've spoken about quite a specific example that's relevant to us, but what are the things that are relevant to you? What things can impact how you are able to work and to perform in your business? And let's have a think about together now, what things can we do to make sure that we're able to continue, that we are consciously aware of the impact, whether it's on our physical or mental health, but all the way through the year, not just because there's been a peak season, but we're running a business 12 months through the year, all year round. What kind of simple things can we remind ourselves to do to make sure that we are putting that at the forefront? Because without you, there is no business.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
So let's talk some practicalities, because we've talked about our personal experiences and things that you might want to just consider, because you don't know until it happens to you, really. Until something happens, you don't really, a lot of things you don't think of until they happen, So, let's be practical, and, we're not being airy-fairy about this. Me and Lindsay are both very hands-on doers. We're like Yorkshire people. We fucking just, pardon me, sorry if you've got kids in the car, we just get on with it, do you know what I mean? But we've both had struggles, like, in the past with things, particularly doing the job we used to do. It was very stressful. There was a lot of things that can affect you doing a job like that. So we've grown like a lot of resilience over the years, but we've also we've experienced difficult times, but you accepting that you're going to have a difficult time and actually thinking how I'm going to sort it out if I get to that point. That's really what we're getting at.
Yeah.
So if
rather that kind of like you say, accepting it, acknowledging it, rather than, no, I'll be fine. I've just got to get to this point.
Yeah, because you'll probably burn out or, give in before you actually get to the point where you think, I'm going to get to the point. So if we're thinking ahead of time, right, things that you should be coming up to end of the year, everybody's in this industry, pretty much everybody, January, February is going to have a quieter time, and it's when everyone's going to start working on the business and thinking, and we're hoping to be able to bring you podcasts that are going to help you in relation to things. We're going to be discussing things about, how you're going to take your business forward, right? But generally, the things that we really need to think about in this time, it's a time to, put stuff in place, right? So, biggest things. These are the things that we kind of would say are the biggest things. So communication, right? You'll have heard us mention about communication before. You'll definitely hear us talk about it in the new year. Communication is it's one of the biggest tools that you can have, particularly if you're trying to influence people, trying to get, customers, how you communicate, whether that's in like a sales way or whether that's in a building relationships way. Very important. What people might forget is that communication is just as important once you've done someone's wedding, right? And by getting your communication right and having a good communication sort of strategy, will make sure that you are setting expectations and you are building that resilience into your business. So for example, something that we do is we send an email out the day after the wedding which says exactly what's going to happen next, and it reminds them of in the contract. And again, that's something you need to think about, is what you've got written in your contracts and in your terms and conditions. It reminds them that the contract says it's up to 6 months for delivery of their wedding. Now, that's a long time. Let's be honest, no one wants to leave it 6 months. That's bloody ridiculous. Like, they've forgotten about the wedding after 6 months. They might even be divorced, who knows, right? But we're putting that in there because it gives us some space, right? If something bad happens, you get injured, you get poorly, you have a bereavement in your family, crikey, something really bad happens to you. You've got the 6 months before people can start legally taking sort of action against you. And if you're in a real dire straits, if things really go wrong for you, the last thing you want is to be worrying about people trying to get solicitors and stuff involved because you haven't delivered on what you said you were going to deliver in. So, that email will say, remind them the contract says 6 months. However, we aim to deliver within this time frame, and that's up to you what you say, and that will potentially change depending on the time of year, because it could be 2 to 4 weeks in a quiet time, it could be 2 to 4 months in a busy time. So that's huge. Communication's huge, and it just takes the stress away from you, because if they ask you and you haven't said, you're going to feel stressed, right? But if you've already said and you've set those expectations, you've communicated them early, it helps big style.
And when you're doing that with each and every client as well, so make it a consistent thing as well. When you're doing it each time, you know when you get, as you're working your way through the queue, you'll know when that person's wedding was. So it kind of just, everybody knows where they stand.
Yeah.
And importantly for just as you've said, that's a big one for you.
And that actually comes on to something. So I was going to actually mention CRMs, or you could use schedules and diaries. And it just with you saying that, there's a board up there, there's a whiteboard, and when we get a chance to do it, we try to write every client, every wedding on there. And I try to put the dates so that I know when to shot the wedding and then when the kind of estimated or, ideal delivery date is. That way it's a visual thing so that when we are editing those weddings, we kind of know when we're supposed to have them ready for. And obviously if we can get them ready early, that's great. But we're also keeping an eye on the fact that if we're coming up to a point where we've said it's probably going to be this long and it's clearly not going to be because something has gone wrong and we need more time, then we're communicating that. We're sending an email before they send us an email. And it doesn't happen every time. Sometimes you just get somebody who's really kind of keen and becomes quite annoying, and they're just like a week after the wedding, they're like, is it ready yet? My photo's ready, my video's ready. But, most people, if you communicate in advance, will respect you far more than if they have to chase you up. So, using whatever sort of tool you want to use, whether it's a diary, whether it's a whiteboard, a scheduler, a spreadsheet, or like your CRM, these things are invaluable. And making sure that if you've got something like a CRM, so while we're on that topic, having your information stored in a CRM, again, if something happens to you or something's going on and you need to like outsource something or you need to get help from somebody, having your information stored in a CRM does make that a lot easier than just it being in your head or on scraps of paper or whatever where you've decided you want to organize yourself. Because in that CRM, things can be exported, people can be given logins to it, and then they've got that information. It's easy to access. Most of the CRMs are going to be cloud-based. It just makes a there's so many. We'll do a whole thing on the CRM we use in the future because it's so amazing and it's such a game-changing tool. But there's a lot to be said for how little a CRM costs and the benefits, and particularly something like this, something happening in your life. Being able to keep track of things or have somebody else keep track of things is a game changer. And obviously there's a lot of automation and things built into that too.
Yeah.
The time saving, and when you're kind of backs against the wall, in some times you might not mind having to write every email out by hand or look like when you're trying to look for information. Have to do it in some sort of manual capacity. But when you really haven't got extra time and your back's against the wall, having things organised or having things automated, payments, all the rest of it, godsend. There's the obvious things of how to divide your time. How do we divide our time, Lindsay?
Well, to 9 a.m. it's school run for Amy, 9 to 9:30 dishes, wash it. No. I feel like that's $1 million, or more recently I felt like that's $1 million question, dividing your time. I think for during the day, and again I'm conscious how often maybe we say we've got kids or we've got this, and that there'll be plenty of you that don't have that family dynamic, that family setup necessarily. So, but just consider it in your own circumstances. So for me, in terms of daily breakup, Monday to Friday, I think of it during term time and non-term time. And
they're different, aren't they?
At its very best, I have just short of 6 hours during that daytime, during those school hours, where I see as my window of opportunity to be able to get work done. Because then
but
after that, when the kid, but definitely not recently. And so that's one of the ways in which that's really impacted us recently, because we would do our podcast recording, wouldn't we, during the day while the kids were at school. But as I say, consider it in your own circumstances. what does your kind of daily breakdown of time look like? What does it consist of? Do you start each week or each day with a to-do list? How is that proportioned? Is that by hour? Is that 2 hourly, 3 hourly? Does it depend on what you're doing? And how closely do you monitor that and be able to stick to that?
And what do you do if suddenly that a spanner gets thrown in the works and you no longer have that time or that time distribution?
Yeah.
What do you do?
How easy do you find it to be able to adapt to that? So we talk about adaptability in kind of the macro sense when we're thinking about our businesses and when we're thinking about external factors that might impact on our business. But think of it at the polar opposite. Think really, really on the small scale, on the day-by-day micro scale. What if you've got a plan for Tuesday this week and you've set your stall out between, you're going to be working between about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, full day's work, but you get a phone call from a friend or a family member and they need your help in some way. And so you need to leave what you're doing and you need to go to them to help them. How, in its own right, how does that affect you? So
what if you're sick?
What if you're sick? What if you wake up one morning, you just can't get out of bed? You know, it's winter season, lots of bugs and illnesses and things going around again. You know, what if you just can't simply meet your own expectations of what you'd set out to do? How does that impact you? What are you going to do to be able to respond to that? Are you going to be kind to yourself? Are you going to give yourself the time that you need to be able to rest and recover from that? Are you going to go to that family member or friend? Are you going to help them? But again, what are you going to do to make that time up?
And it's about having the contingency built in. So whatever deadlines you want to work to, whatever schedule you have in your mind, you really always, just like with money, you should always build in, a contingency budget. Whatever you're charging people shouldn't be what it costs you to do your business, because you should be making some profit and you should also be building some kind of contingency up. Yeah. So these things, it's the same with time. It's the same with organising how you're going to deliver your time, what you're going to do with your time in case something happens and then you can't deliver it on time. Have you got extra days in there? Are you going to be able to catch up? Because let's be honest, we all just take on too much work sometimes and then we end up feeling stressed. Whereas if we actually built in contingencies, we should never feel stressed really, because we should always be able to take an extra few days here and there if we need them. Because we've built that into the business. And I know that's something that, it's easier said than done, that.
So that is, in terms of dividing up your time, you might be more towards the side of you approach each day quite flexibly, and if you get X, Y, and Z done, great. Or you might be right to the other extreme where it's planned by the hour, by the minute in some instances. But it's just being actively aware of what happens when it can't be either as flexible as you want it to be because something still has cropped up, or it can't be as strict as you want it to be. So think about the hours of the day that are available to you. Also, just bear in mind, you don't know what might crop up through the day. But as Jules said, just also, one, be kind to yourself in not really working yourself into the ground if you do need to take a little bit of rest and kind of step back from things. But two, also as well, just think about what you were just saying.
Well, the bit I was going to come on to is if you can't have the time, what I was going to come on to is like your backup. So what is your backup? Do you have another option, other options, whatever, if just like you see at the moment, you see a lot of people looking for associate shooters to shoot their weddings for them. Do you have backups for getting editing done? Do you have backups for shooting? Like if you couldn't go shoot that wedding, what do you do? Like who's your first point of call? Because I don't honestly think it should be a group. I think that should be the shit's hit the fan and you have no other options point of call. But I don't think you should be going on to a group as your first point of call. There should be already people you have in mind. And obviously if it's a busy Saturday in summer, most people are going to be working. But you should know I'm going to contact these people first because I've worked with them before. I've spoken to them to say, would you ever do that? If I'll help you out, you help me out. It's good to build up those networks. And outsourcing, what would you be able to outsource? Let's say you had a serious illness or injury tomorrow, or a bereavement that you found very difficult to cope with, and you needed to buy yourself space, buy yourself time. And you knew you had a load of edits, you knew you had a load of weddings coming up. How would you outsource it? How would you pay for that? Would you be able to, have you got that built into your budget to be able to pay for that outsourcing and still make enough money to live? And who and how would you find someone to outsource different things to? And that could be editing, it could be shooting, it could be administration, communication. If you're in hospital, who's going to take over that for you? Some of us, we're very lucky. There's two of us, so hopefully, it would be, it'd be very unfortunate if something happened to both of us at the same time. So the idea being that we both can run the business. We might not be able to do every single bit of it, both, but we both can run the business. Not everyone's going to be in that situation. And what happens if we can't do it? Who knows? Who can we tell? Who can we get to help? Have you got a support network as well? So, we're talking about outsourcing to like people who work in the industry, specialists in the areas, but also have you got a support network? Have you got friends and family that can step in and help you? And it's not just about whether they can help you, but it's about being able to talk to somebody, being able to, the main thing that you need to kind of get out of this is there's the practical side of running your business, but there's also the practical side of running you, right? You've got to keep yourself going. You've got to keep yourself together. And if you're struggling, the last thing you want to do is take yourself to a place where it's really hard to get back up from. So you need to make sure you've thought through, if things were getting hard for me, what would I do? Have I got people I can talk to? Who are your friends and family that you could talk to? And having things as well in your life that you can do
that are a welcome distraction from this, that give you something else to kind of focus on. That
create a positive well-being situation for you. Whether that's exercise, whether it's reading, whether it's meditation,
any kind of hobby, anything creative, something else that's creative but is very much a departure from what you're sort of doing. There'll be a number of people within the industry that have an artistic background, for example. So think of, if you're naturally a creative person, where else could you kind of turn that to? You, for instance, if you had the time, there's a piece of kit down there for DJing, for sort of playing with music and things like that. And I'm sure that given the time, you would kind of like to put
given
a bit
the
more
time,
into
I'd do all sorts. Lose a couple of stone. Get back into running. So there you go. I've just told you mine. We're talking about this because, we've realised that, we already knew this stuff, but it's very easy to get on a path of stuff going on. You're trying to work. You're trying to build a business. You're trying to spend time with your family, and then before you know it, you realise that you've kind of turned your back on a lot of things. Hobbies and interests and time for yourself, looking after your own kind of health, whether that's physical or mental health, and you then, if something happens, you realise how much you need those things. So that's kind of why we're talking about it. And if you're into that place where it's got so bad that you're really not coping, and you can't just have sick leave, you really do need to feel confident about going and speaking to a GP, seeking some kind of counselling or therapy, mental health charities, and being able to talk to somebody or some people, family or friends, because people will understand. And sometimes it's just really important to get things off your chest, to be able to talk to somebody and tell them, especially if you're on your own and you're running your business. If you're single, you don't have a partner, you know, that can be a very lonely place. So it's really important that if that's the case, whether it's now or in the future, that you do something about it. Because you know you're not going to be any good to yourself. You're not going to be any good to your clients, your customers, your couples if you don't look after yourself. That's the main thing.
And that's something that we've actively researched for ourselves for over the last few months. And so I know normally at the end of this podcast we'll say, you know, any comments, topic suggestions, any feedback on the episode we would welcome. I would 100% say that, you know, if we can in any way help anybody by sharing some of the routes that we've tried to access for ourselves and our own well-being over the past few months, then absolutely please do get in touch, if for nothing else for that, after this episode. Thank you.
Cool. Right. Well, it's kind of that time again, Linz, to wrap it up.
Already? Oh my gosh. Well, I think that was really important to do that today. And, you know, I just want to thank you all for bearing with us and for continuing to listen and watch us, despite the fact that we've been radio
very
silent, as it were. Yeah, very inconsistent. We do hope that gets better going forward. We are only human, but genuinely, we're nearly at the end of the year, and we hope that across the board, everybody is well. Everybody's safe, and you've enjoyed it, and you're looking forward to the start of another one. Yeah.
We'll be back with another one next week, hopefully, and plenty more in the new year. I've just pressed the button by accident. That's really embarrassing. But bit out of practice.
Stepping into Christmas, that's why, aren't you? In a hurry.
I should have put a Christmas song on. Yeah. Have a good Christmas, and we'll be speaking to you again next week.
Best wishes. Take care, everyone.
See you later. Bye.